Hi everyone, this is Larry Staudt, back again for the fourth installment on the series of videos about the book, That's Why I'm Here, a discussion of meaning and purpose in life. So if you haven't looked at the previous videos, I recommend you go back to the first video and work your way up to this one. So here we go on chapter 4. So this series of videos is based on the book That's Why I'm Here, which is available on Amazon. And we're up to chapter 4 at this stage. And so the first chapter was a summary of the entire book. It was the longest video where you got sort of an outline, if you like, of everything in the book, and including my notions of meaning and purpose in life. And but then I threatened to carry on with the other chapters, which bring more information to the table. And so the second chapter was about where we fit in as human beings, background information. And then chapter 3 was about tracing human development, how we got to where we are today. And now we're on to the fourth chapter on meaning and purpose. It uses the previous two chapters' information as a foundation for discussing meaning and purpose. And then we'll carry on with a couple of chapters after that. So here we go. So my wife was a childbirth class teacher, instructor, and preparing young families for the birth of their children. And that was great. But she decided to follow on with that with any mothers that were interested with mothering classes. So some of the practicalities of being a new mother or experienced mother, sort of a sharing thing that she entitled the Spiritual Mothering Classes, because it looked at how to raise your child in a loving atmosphere, that kind of thing. So anyway, she was one of her mothers who already had a couple of children, was saying how she was struggling with the questions that her children would ask her, about sort of the bigger questions of life, and particularly what's right and what's wrong, So you tell your child, that they're doing something wrong, and they say something to the effect of, says who? And so this woman was saying that, how can I teach my child what's right and wrong if I myself aren't sure about the answers to these questions? So that's a problem. We carry on as parents, we do the best we can, but kids know when you're waffling, So you have to have some level of conviction, and so it's good. This is the point. It's good if you have conviction when you're talking to your kids about what's right and wrong. So we need we need some kind of answers to these questions. And so we're at a stage now, as I've said before, as a race where we think independently. And so we do think about these questions, but sometimes we come up with disparate answers. Like what I teach my kids is right and wrong is different from what you teach your kids is right and wrong. And we really do need, as a society, common understandings, if we can find them, in order that society has common standards that we can function effectively as a group, as a human race. And the obvious analogy is in sports, where all of the players on the pitch need to have a common understanding of the sport. And if one of them is operating on a different agenda or with different understandings, you better believe the coach will pull him off rather quickly and replace him. So this is the point. We all have notions about the bigger questions of life, but I claim that they need to be common notions in order for us to function effectively. Not only that should they be common notions, but they should be comprehensible to everybody, ideally, because once again, if you need a high level of education to understand these abstract things, then that's no good. Every human being should understand what their life is about, regardless of intellect, regardless of education, regardless of social circumstances. Ideally, this idea of purpose and meaning in life should be common and comprehensible by all. So, as discussed in previous videos, the purpose of any created thing is known by its creator. I gave the example of an air fryer, which to me was a mystery until I read the information from its creator. I didn't buy one, by the way. And so I've made the case that we are obviously the result of a creative process, and so therefore there's a creator, and it just makes a lot of sense that if you want to know the purpose of the created thing, which happens to be you, we need to look to our creator to come up with authoritative and common understandings of why we're here. And so I've made the proposal that the great religions of the world have appeared here and there around the world, such that every human being has had access to information from the Creator over the many years of our history, and that guidance is periodically renewed. And while the spiritual essence of all religions is the same and stays the same over time, then the information might be given in more detail with, over time as religions come. And also social teachings change because society has changed. And then the other factor for renewing is that we as human beings have modified the pure teachings of the Creator. And so they need to be renewed and restated. So, like I say in the previous videos, I've discussed the levels of being, and probably the highest level is our Creator, and we're we have our place, we have our level, but one of the levels above us are these great messengers with a capital M, messengers of God: Buddha, Krishna, Zoroaster, Abraham, Moses, Christ, Muhammad, Baha'u'llah. And so they've been like teachers in a school to us. And the principal is the Creator. I made that analogy. So this is information from our Creator, including ideas about purpose and meaning. So first we need to recognize that these messengers are messengers and have brought valuable information. So that's task number one for us. And then secondly, we need to try to live up to that guidance, which of course is impossible, but we try our best to live according to the will of God as brought by these messengers. So I forgot to say that this is probably the shortest video of them all, because according to me, the purpose, of our lives is quite simple and quite understandable, which, as I said before, that to me is one of the requirements of that. It can't be so abstract and intellectually challenging that people kind of shrug their shoulders, at it, which has been the assumption, I think, in recent history, that this question is considered so unapproachable that people don't even think about it. I actually remember when I was a teenager, I would occasionally go to church, but when I started thinking about why am I here, it didn't even cross my mind that religion might hold answers, because I viewed it more of a social function at the time, which is kind of funny given my present thinking, that it seems very obvious that our Creator has given us information by which to operate our lives, and that gives us knowledge of meaning and purpose. And so, finally, to the point of the entire book, what is our purpose in life? Well, religion tells us that our purpose in this life is to develop our souls in preparation for existence in the next life. So as I've said before, this life is a period of incubation in the same way that in the womb we are incubating, if you like, in preparation for life after the womb. Yeah, so there's two aspects to life purpose, and one is we're developing ourselves spiritually, becoming more honest, more persevering, all the qualities of the soul that you admire in people. And this is an active thing that we should be working on. So, to sort of the womb analogy, physical development happens in the womb. We have nothing to say about it. It just happens according to the laws of nature. Spiritual development happens in this life for our birth into the next life. And we have something to do with that. We have to try. We have to actively develop our spirits. And if we don't, if we just kind of float along through this life, then we'll be less prepared when we get to the next life, and we won't function as well in the next life, because that will be all we have in the next life is our soul, and it needs to be in tip-top shape. So we need to work on it in this life using our free will. So the second aspect, religion tells us, to our lives is that we should develop our talents and capacities to serve others. That is our station in life, is servitude, which is kind of funny to say, because a common misconception is that you want to be at the top of the heap and telling your servants what to do, and in fact it's the other way around. Matter of fact, this wasn't part of the plan here, but in the back of the book I have appendices, and in the appendices I give some quotes from religion regarding service. So Hinduism says, meaning the teachings of Krishna, strive constantly to serve the welfare of the world. By devotion to selfless work, one attains the supreme goal of life. Do your work with the welfare of others always in mind. Okay, so now here we have from Christianity, Christ said, "And he sat down and called the 12, and he said to them, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and the servant of all." In Islam, see if I can find a good one here. Yeah. Muhammad said, "You have been raised to serve others." Simply stated. In the Baha'i faith it says, "That one indeed is a man who today dedicateth himself to the service of the entire human race." So anyway, there's a few quotes from religion on service, and they all say the same thing, which is no surprise because they're all from the same source. So, I forgot to say in the previous slide, by being of service to others, we develop ourselves spiritually, because we can be loving to others, and so we develop our capacity to love. We can be generous to others, and so we're developing our soul's attribute of generosity. So really, we need others to develop spiritually. It seems kind of almost selfish, And then also at the same time, we're improving the conditions, in this life, such that others can have a better spiritual education in this life. Right now, we have no notion of what's going on. I always used to say to my kids, when you get to the next life, you're going to get bonus points, because society is so clueless about what this life is about, and it's a real struggle to work against that tide and try to develop yourself spiritually when so many others are ignorant of this situation. Anyway, so at the present time, all of creation operates according to the laws of nature. The laws of nature represent the will of the Creator. The Creator programmed everything to operate the way it does in nature. However, I almost said he made the mistake of giving us free will. But he gave us free will for a reason, and so we don't have to operate according to the laws of nature, i.e., according to the will of the Creator, and we don't. But we need to try to do that. We need to try to do that. That's the point. And that is what we're told, in religion. So how do we do that? Well, we need to go to the source of information. What is the will of God for us? And try to sort that out. And once we find out what it is, we need to try to do that. I used to joke with my kids because I would say words to this effect to them. And I would say, well, in your life you only have to do two things. Oh, really? Well, the first one is to recognize God's messenger or messengers, And they would say, okay, we got that one. We know who they are. They're great. Well done, well done. What's the second thing? Thinking they would tick that one off the list and everything would be fine. And I said, well, you just have to do everything they say. And then they would groan and realize that there was a lot of work ahead, So we need to find out what the messengers say using our free will because we got it for some reason. And then find out how God wants us to be. And then work on becoming that way. So that's pretty simple. If simple in principle, not simple to do. If we can do this, then guess what? The whole universe is going to be operating in the way that the Creator intended. So for me, it points out the exciting times we live in, right? Because tens of thousands of years ago, our latent free will became manifest. And what that meant was we had been operating sort of at the animal level according to nature, according to the laws of our Creator. So everything was in harmony, if you like, in the universe. And then we got our free will, and everything was not in harmony anymore because we were running around killing each other and killing animals and, tinkering with nature in negative ways. But now, as we wake up to this reality, this purpose, that we should all be actively seeking out what the Creator wants us to do and then trying to do it, we will have come full circle and we will have come back to trying at least to live according to the will of our Creator. And this is a seminal moment in human history. Well, it's not a moment. It's going to take centuries to pull that off. But we will. And creation will become complete, if you like, because we're the only bits of creation that's misbehaving. So that's the core of what we're on about. We need to develop ourselves spiritually, one, and number two, be of service to others. To develop ourselves spiritually, we need to find out what the Creator has told us, to do regarding our spiritual development. And following God's guidance is not a mindless thing. The intellect is involved. The point is, of course, it's about the heart as well. The more you do this, the more appreciation and love you have for your Creator. And but the intellect is also a gift from God, and we should engage that when we're thinking about spiritual things. And back in the day in the church that my wife and I got married in, the minister was a wonderful guy, and before we got married, we had the traditional discussion with the minister, and we had no idea what he was going to talk about, and we were surprised. Or he said we should make plans. Okay, that's good guidance, And I don't remember anything else he said. It was all very friendly, except the conversation then moved on to how things were going at the church, and he was a lovely, popular guy, and people would come, a lot of people would come to church. And he was kind of lamenting to us, confiding in us, that he said, all these nice people that come to the church, they have responsible positions in society, and they're great folks. But when they come to my church, they leave their brains at the door. I was shocked, because it never even crossed my mind that you needed really to engage your brain when you were in church. So anyway, that obviously made an impression on me. This is not something you just kind of shrug your shoulders and go to church, and that's me, sort of getting a dose of spirituality for the week, It's not that easy. You need to actively engage. You don't want to leave your brains at the door. Another thing about sort of engaging with religion is sometimes people think that faith is a separate thing. It's a mindless thing. They think incorrectly. Sure, faith is something that, resonates with your heart and that kind of thing. And so it's quite intangible in that way. However, if you are engaged with spiritual investigations, you discover things, right? Truths. And, they make sense intellectually as well as resonating with your inner being. But I make the analogy, I used to use this analogy with maps, that if you have a map, and say a map of Ireland, and you want to get to, God knows where, Killarney or something. So you get in the car and you follow the map and you get to where you're going. And without thinking about it, that is an act of faith, right? You've used the map before. It has reliably gotten you to where you wanted to go. And so the next time you want to go somewhere to Letterkenny or whatever, you're quite confident you can get there because you have this map that has guided you before. So now, of course, I have to use GPS, so you punch in where you want to go in the GPS and it starts spouting instructions to you. And it has gotten you in the past to where you want to go. And so the next time you want to go somewhere, you have confidence in the GPS. Well, guess what? It doesn't work every time. I'm sure you've had the experience of the GPS sort of aiming you out into a field or something. So anyway, generally, there's no guarantee that the map or the GPS is going to be right, but it's worked for you before. So the same thing is true with this guidance that religion provides. So you take it on faith that your Creator knows better than you do as to how to behave and that kind of thing. And so you give it a go, and it works, And so the next time you try to implement this guidance, and it works again, now your faith is reinforced. Well, by the time you do that 100 times and you discover, guess what? The Creator's right. just plain old right, then that's faith. But it's a practical faith. Faith is, it needn't be blind. So this is my point. Following God's guidance is not a mindless thing. So, your challenge, your mission, should you decide to accept it, is finding God's guidance, right? Because a lot of human ideas have been injected, into religion. And so have been silly things, like eating hot dogs on Friday is a sin. Where did Christ say that? Well, that's kind of been dismissed at this point. But all kinds of crazy things, some of which still live in organized religion, are there, And so what your mission is to find the pure teachings of Christ or the pure teachings of Buddha or whatever. So how do you do that? And, that's your challenge, and I don't have lots of answers, but I think you have to go to the various holy books, and you have to read them with a bit of skepticism, saying, did Christ say that? Did Christ say no meat on Fridays? No, he never did. So then you go, well, maybe that's not a pure teaching. So how do we find guidance that is actually from God? So I say, seek out, if you can, the actual words of God's messengers. Remember my friend's definition of religion, what came out of the mouth of Christ. That's religion. The other stuff may not be. So seek out the actual words of God's messengers to guide your life, especially the more recent religions. Christianity, Islam, the Baha'i faith, because they're more recent, they have higher probability of not having been changed over time. I don't know if you know the game Chinese Whispers, where you sit in a circle and one person whispers something to the person to their right, and it goes all the way around the circle, and by the time it comes back to him, what is the message, and invariably it's well changed, So anyway, over time, things can actually quite naturally become a little bit changed. So seek out the actual words of God's messengers. That's my suggestion to you, since what you need to do, your mission is to find out what your Creator has told you to do. So that's hard enough, given what I've just said, but harder yet is then to actually put that into practice. It takes a lifetime. Guess what? Yeah. And that's what your lifetime is about. So religion says we have two duties in this life. And so I'll read you, and it supports what I've just said. The first duty prescribed by God for his servants is the recognition of him who is the dayspring of his revelation and the fountain of his laws. So that's the first duty, to recognize that information has come from a messenger or messengers. That's number one. So now you know where to turn for your information. And then the second quote is, it behooveth everyone who reacheth this most sublime station, in other words, recognizing the messenger or messengers, it behooveth that person to observe every ordinance of him who is the desire of the world. These twin duties are inseparable. So obviously, one without the other doesn't work. So first of all, you need a source of guidance. So find out what God has said, the messenger. But if you do that and then you don't follow that guidance, it's fruitless. So number one without number two doesn't work. And number two without number one is impossible. How can you follow guidance that you haven't discovered, So another way of describing purpose, I don't want to get too far away from the two purposes that I propose, but it's quite there's many facets to this question. So religion says that this is you speaking, saying a prayer, thou God, capital T, has created me to know thee and to worship thee. I know that I was worried about this word worship, so we'll discuss that. But first, how do we know God? Since we were made to know God, how can we know God? And in the past, I've said, well, the short answer is we can't know God. We can't know levels above us. But we can, knowing that we can't fully know God, we can still approach God, if you want to put it that way. So how do we do that? Well, there's a number of ways. By observing the lives and teachings of God's messengers, I contend they reflect God to us like a perfect mirror. And the funny thing is, you hear people say things like, well, Christ is my God, and it's sort of like, whoa, wait a minute. That's confusing because Christ talks about God as another being, So how can you understand that? And an analogy that works for me is that of the mirror. So I contend that God's messengers reflect God to us. They provide an image of God, not physically. They embody all the attributes of God, if you like. So if you think about it, if you look at a mirror, look at yourself in a mirror, you can say three things and be telling the truth each time. One, that is me. Number two, that's a reflection of me. Number three, that's a mirror. So you looked in the mirror, said three different things, and you're telling the truth each time. So when we say, Christ is my God, Christ is a perfect reflection of God. Matter of fact, it says that in the Bible, Christ is an exact representation of God. So the mirror, this analogy explains away all of this concern about these messengers being God. Well, they're not God. Their essential station is that of a mirror reflecting God. They had a physical body, like the physical mirror. They brought us God's teachings, so they're kind of like God to us. And then the reality is they are a mirror reflecting God to us. So anyway, so we observe the lives and teachings of God's messengers who bring God to us, reflect God to us. Another way to know God is by observing creation. So you may be a big fan of Van Gogh, the painter, but you can't. So if you have detailed knowledge of his paintings, then you know him better than somebody else, So if you look at creation, the wonders of creation, and you gain some knowledge, of God, because the Creator is manifest in the creation, if you like. And if you want to know somebody, you talk to them, right? And so prayer is conversation with God. So that's another way to know God. And then regarding worship, this is a quote from religion. This is worship, to serve mankind and to minister to the needs of the people. Isn't that sweet? So that's the best way to worship God. My previous notion, worship brought images to mind of, sort of prostrating myself before God and just sort of humbling myself, which I'm not saying is necessarily a bad idea, but that kind of didn't sit with me as comfortably as it might, because being an independent adolescent human being, that sounded doubtful. So then I looked in the dictionary, what is worship? And one of the definitions is reverent love and allegiance. So I thought, what a nice way to put it. So worshiping God has to do with loving God. Loving God is a natural consequence of knowing God. That's just me. These are just my ideas. You may disagree. So anyway, this is knowing and worshiping is another aspect of our purpose, why we were created. Thou hast created me to know thee and to worship thee. That's me talking there. Yeah. So now we're back to Miss O'Brien and our principal, who is saying to the class, which is us, please obey Mrs. O'Brien. Miss O'Brien, sorry. And so here is a story that was the inspiration, if you like, for this illustration. And it has to do with the idea of a covenant. So a covenant is an agreement or a contract. And that, in this case, has to do with our agreement with God as human beings. And so here we go. The relationship of God with man in this covenant is somewhat similar to the relationship between the principal of a school and the child. As soon as a child goes to school for the first time, he enters into a covenant with the school principal, although often without really knowing it. In this contract, the principal provides the means for the education of the child. He appoints teachers to teach him, draws up the educational program, and ensures the child's well-being and development in every way. The child's part in this covenant is to follow the instructions of the teacher and learn every lesson he is taught. It is through this process that the child acquires intellectual and spiritual powers. As the child grows in learning and maturity, the principal will appoint other teachers to contribute to his education. In this covenant, the responsibilities of the two parties are fundamentally different. They cannot be confused and are not interchangeable. Another feature of this covenant is that the two parties are not of the same caliber. One side, the school principal, is knowledgeable, wise, and strong. The other, the child, is unlearned, weak, and immature. The terms of this covenant are drawn up entirely by the strong party, and the child has no say in them. Usually, the weaker party is the loser when a contract is drawn up solely by the strong. Not so in this case, for the motive of the principal in making all the arrangements is his love for the child and concern for its education. His greatest ambition is to see the child attain wisdom and knowledge. Isn't that sweet? The same is true of God. He is the Creator and Almighty, the author of the covenant, whose terms he himself has stipulated unilaterally without the help of man. As in the above example, God's part in this covenant is different from man's. So in this analogy, God's messengers, Buddha, Krishna, Moses, Christ, Baha'u'llah, the founders of the world's great religions, are our teachers, and God is the principal. They bring the guidance of our Creator to us. So I think that's a very effective analogy. So we must be thankful to the principal and to Miss O'Brien. So the point is, there's a caring Creator who tries to help us to develop spiritually in this life, because that's what's best for us, as it turns out. And we'll find out how important that development was when we arrive in the next life. So the proposal is, the theory is, that we need to use our free will and, after investigation, decide that the guidance offered by these teachers is what is best for us. So we must submit to it. I think somebody told me once that Islam, the word means submission, maybe, as in submission to submission to God, But it's a very rational submission. It makes sense to defer to a higher level of being. But we don't have to. We have free will. So that's the theory, and there's a lot of support for it. So if we all decide, as we will eventually, as we mature, that we need to work on our spiritual development in this life, using the help provided by God's messengers, number one, and number two, that we should be serving others. So if we all decide that, and we will, as we mature over the coming centuries, there's going to be some great outcomes. And I've stated these before, but they're worth stating again. So if we become that way, we naturally enough, as a material spiritual balance is achieved in this life, our obsession with material things will reduce, and we won't be as driven by material concerns. Therefore, we won't do the crazy things that we do in pursuit of political power or monetary, well-being. As I said before, we won't be chasing super yachts and that kind of thing while the rest of the world lives in squalor, We become more focused on others because that's the second half of our purpose, to be of service to others. So that'll be good. Actually, rich people, there are people out there who are good at making money, and I don't begrudge that. It's the question is, what do you then do with your money? And if you're focused on others, then instead of getting your super yacht, you will become charitably minded, and use your money for good things. And you'll do it without making a big show of it. You'll just kind of quietly give away most of your money. I don't mean to the point of poverty. I mean, you'll still be rich enough, So anyway, rich people have a real challenge, to figure out what to do with all of this money that they can't take with them, So we become more focused on others. Our lifestyle becomes more moderate, Right now, immoderate living is actually, helping to degrade the planet. But I won't get into that yet. We become happier. Why? Because we're living lives that are in line with the forces of creation, and you just become happy and content. You're less worried because even though this life has plenty of problems that are sometimes, some of the problems are a result of human free will. We do stupid things and that impacts others, But some of the other problems are actually, I contend, sent by the Creator. Why? Because they'll help us develop spiritually, and that's what counts in this life, nothing else. So we become less worried because we know that we have a loving Creator keeping an eye on us, and the problems that we have are temporary, let's put it that way, that the problems are probably good for us, and we're just going to muck on through, because that's the nature of this life. Our appreciation of the natural world increases because we see it as a creation. Remember Einstein's quote about the details we're able to perceive with our frail and feeble minds. So the more you look at creation, the more amazing it is when you see things as a creation, which is what they are. And a sustainable global civilization becomes possible because we're cooperating with each other, we're serving each other. And so if this could happen, that people actually wake up to their purpose over the coming centuries, it's going to be really a positive thing for the human race. So in summary, chapter 4 has two simple takeaways regarding the purpose of life. And it's a twofold purpose. The first one being to work at developing our souls in preparation for existence in the next life, based on the suggestions of our Creator as found in the words of the messengers of God. And then secondly, to develop our talents and capacities in service to humanity. So both these things are something that every human being, I contend, should be doing. Figuring out how they can make that happen in their lives. What makes it different is all of our circumstances and our unique personalities with our unique talents and capacities. We have to sort out our way forward to achieve these two purposes. And I have to say that as we do that, it's not like we've arrived, that we're somehow superior to others, because we're not. And as they sometimes say, God don't make no junk. Each of us, every human being, you meet is a result of God's creative power. So God meant that person to be here as much as you wish that person wasn't here. Only joking, only joking. But so everybody's different, sometimes really different, and that's a challenge, you know. But we all can pursue these things. Your path to achieving these things is going to be totally unique. So, but you can be confident that if you start pursuing it, you will succeed because you're in line with the forces of the universe. So that's really the short summary of this chapter and a short summary of the entire book. So the rest is kind of window dressing, but it does provide sort of a foundation, a framework for understanding these two things. Next, we're going to look at, we're going to take a break from purpose, really, and just take a look at what we should be doing about the natural world and what should be our attitude toward the planet, let's say.